Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the final day of the symposium on multi-stakeholders engagement in forest protected area governance for conservation and livelihoods. This is our second workshop of the week. This morning, we will discuss about urban community forestry for society. Urban community forestry is relatively a new concept in Global South. We have talked a lot about community forestry, where forest-dependent local people are engaged in forest management for their livelihood improvement. In the case of urban community forestry, which is probably unique in Malaysia, groups of self-motivated urban residents collaborate with other stakeholders with the forestry department to conserve small patch of secondary forest, mainly for recreation and education. In this workshop, we have 3 panelists who will share their sweet or sour experiences toward conserving 3 important forest patches in Greater Kuala Lumpur. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please take note that after the presentation, feel free to join the live Q&A segment. You can share your questions on the platform and our speakers will try to answer all of them if time permits. Now, you will see a question box on your platform. If you don't see it, don't worry, just refresh your page and it should pop out, okay? Now let's get started. Moderating this workshop will be Dr. Tapan Kumarnath, an Associate Professor of the School of Environmental and Geographical Sciences at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Dr. Tapan is a social scientist with experience in applying social, ecological, and sustainable livelihood frameworks for the collaborative natural resources management and livelihood analysis of forest-dependent communities. Prior to his role in UNM, he worked at University of Chittagong, the University of Tokyo, and Asian Institute of Technology at various levels. His current interests include stakeholders' participation in forest management, livelihood analysis, sustainable intensification of agroecological practices, and urban green spaces and human well-being. With that, please give Dr. Tapan a warm welcome. Over to you, Dr. Tapan.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks, Vanessa, for this lovely introduction of this workshop, as well as introducing myself. So as our Vanessa mentioned, this urban community forest, I should say, is unique to Malaysia. And if we look at community forestry practices in other countries, these are mostly in the protected areas or reserve forest or other remote forest areas. But in urban areas, we don't have any community involvement to protect this forest. So in that sense, I think this workshop is very important to share our experience, how community people in Malaysia, they are working together with other stakeholders to protect this forest for future generations. So forest is not about the timber. Nowadays, forest is for our health, forest is for our environment, and forest is for our society. So in that sense, I think we need to share the knowledge that we have so that people know how we are struggling to protect our forest resources in the urban areas. We have 3 panelists today. So these 3 panelists will talk about 3 important phases of urban forest in Malaysia, mostly in the Klang Valley. So our first speaker, I think Dr. Kiban will be our second speaker. So our first speaker will be Ong Eileen. So she's a lawyer by training, but has been volunteering with Malaysian Nature Society since 2000. We know Malaysian Nature Society is one of the most prominent NGO in Malaysia that are working with other stakeholders to protect the nature in Malaysia. And she is also involved with Kota Damansara Community Forest since 2006. And even before its gazettement as forest reserve. She is currently the president of Kota Damansara Community Forest Society and the vice chair of Malaysian Nature Society, Selangor branch. and coordinator of MNS Selangor Green Living Special Interest Groups. So she'll talk about community managed forest in Malaysia, the Kota Damansara community forest journey. So after her presentation, I will introduce second speaker and then follow the third speaker. So now the floor is on Elaine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tapan. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, the title of my presentation is the Community Managed Forest in Malaysia, the KDCF Journey. So, all right, let me just start with this. Let me just share my screen. All right. All right. First of all, to make it very clear, there is no legal or official status of community forest under the National Forestry Act 1984. Under Section 10 sub 1, there are only categories such as amenity forest, education forest, and research forest, which is the category that the Kota Damansara Community Forest falls under, namely Taman Eco Rimba in Bahasa Malaysia. So do community forests even exist in Malaysia? Yes, but the status is unofficial and informal based on goodwill and mutual understanding. So the general understanding when we mention community managed forests is that they are home to local or indigenous communities, rural communities, and that the local communities derive an income from managing the forest, for example, as a game reserve or as a national park or ecotourism destination. This is often the case in Africa and even part of the Sundarbans in India, but this is not the case in Malaysia. In the Kota Damansara Community Forest, there are no local communities deriving an income from it, and nobody resides there. The original indigenous community, namely the Temuan, have never lived within the forest reserve. The KDCF forest is under the jurisdiction of the Selangor state government, and the Selangor State Forestry Department is the official custodian and enforces forestry laws. So we don't have powers of prosecution, and we don't get to enforce the law or decide the boundaries. They do it. Kota Damansara Community Forest Society is a registered non-governmental organization that represents the interests of the local community and citizens, and we advocate for the protection and responsible management of KDCF and other green lungs. We build and maintain the trail network, we train the forest guide, we engage with educational institutions and the local community, and we mobilize and coordinate volunteers. So how does one get a forest gazetted? What do we have to do? The forestry department has the prerogative to determine the boundary of the forest and then propose it to be gazetted at the state level. So the Kota Damansara Forest Reserve was first gazetted in 1898 by the British colonial administration as the Sungai Buloh Forest Reserve. It was then over 6,000 hectares. Since 1931, it has been subjected to multiple cycles of selective logging, and in more recent decades, it has undergone several boundary adjustments and excisions to make way for new housing and infrastructure development. Efforts to protect and gazette the Kota Damansara Forest Reserve started around 2003, spearheaded by the Malaysian Nature Society, which was then under Tan Sri Dr. Saleh. And a growing sense of forest loss, because by then the Malaysian community has become a lot more aware of environmental issues. So, and nature enthusiasts and recreational and other users, especially the cycling and hiking community, spurred the movement, and everyone was quite willing to take up a more leadership role as advocates to preserve the remaining forest as a green enclave and a wildlife refuge in one of the most built up areas in Selangor, namely Petaling district. So guided by MNS, a loose grouping made up of residents associations and user groups submitted letters to state authorities and mounted a series of activities, including a biodiversity assessment, awareness campaigns, and participatory action involving the local Orang Asli communities. So the Kota Damansara Forest Reserve was finally gazetted as a forest reserve on the 18th of February 2010. And it remains a remnant lowland mixed dipterocarp forest of just over 320 hectares today. KDCFS was registered as a society on the 13th of September 2012. In recognition of its unique history of community engagement, the Selangor Forestry Department then stated its intention to partner with local community organizations in the management of the forest. So KDCFS came up with recommendations for strengthening boundary enforcement and boosting the management capacity of forest rangers. And we came up with proposals to achieve ecological connectivity with neighboring green pockets, for example, those in Sungai Buloh, in Shah Alam, and in Bukit Kiara. As co-managers, KDCFS effectively works hand in hand with the Selangor Forestry Department and local authorities to implement the forest reserves management plan. This relationship is one based on mutual goodwill and shared values. So KDCFS currently has a network of 9 sustainable trails, all built by our partner organization, My Changpo, together with local volunteers, and it measures around 14 kilometers in total. So it's planned and lovingly designed and built by the local Temuan Orang Asli community in close consultation with the Selangor Forestry Department. So of course we need their formal approval and authorization before we can commence any kind of infrastructure development and trail building there. Our sister organization is a social enterprise named Chanko. It was established to employ the Temuan team to carry out trail building and weekly trail maintenance. So corporations can offer to sponsor or adopt a trail on an annual basis, and trail sponsorship pays for the weekly maintenance work for a year. Now, the KDCF Society has not been conferred formal status or rights, whether under the National Forestry Act or any kind of formal written agreement. We have come up with a joint management plan, and it was submitted a number of years ago under the previous director, but to date it has never been executed. So it's only a proposal to provide guidance and does not have any legally binding effect. So we are currently requesting a meeting with the new director, and hopefully we can enter into a new joint management plan with the intention of helping the forestry department and also doing capacity building with the local communities. So these are some of the challenges faced because of the lack of a formal status. A lot of people assume that we have jurisdiction over when the trails are to be opened and what decisions can be made about what infrastructure can be placed on the trails. But ultimately, the ultimate decision maker is the forestry department. We just have a relationship based on goodwill. So what can we do to support our local community managed forests? What if there's a green lung in your area and your local community is interested in protecting and preserving it, or helping the owner of the land, which can be the state government, it can be just state forested land, it can be the forestry department, it could be PKNS, or it could be private developers who's willing to let the local community use it on an informal legal easement basis. So one, you can use your vote to elect representatives who care for the environment and have a good track record. You can be the eyes and ears of the forestry department and your local community forest society. This means you can help look out for and report illegal activities by way of speaking up and petitioning against illegal or excessive development and forest clearing. You can also report wildlife crimes if you notice illegal logging or poaching. And you can also report like illegal forest clearing. This prevents degradation that goes unnoticed by the forestry department or by the local community forest society. Use your voice, write to your elected representative of or local council or to the press if your community forest is under threat. Post on social media to raise awareness and mobilize support. Participate in community events at your community forest. There's nothing more disappointing than organizing an event and just having a handful of volunteers and their family members show up. If we want to convince the local authorities and forest department that the forest has value to the local community, that the local community are active stewards of it, you need to participate in community events and you need to lend your voice to petitions and to online actions taken by your community forest society. Visit and use your community forest frequently and responsibly. The more people use and love a community forest, the harder it is for developers, governmental agencies, and corporations to de-gazette and develop it on grounds that it is not in use and not needed by the local community. So for more information and to find out how you can volunteer or how you can lend your support, you can visit us at kotadamansarforest.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Very comprehensive, and I should say, a very summarized form of KDCF history in this presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, KDCF is one of the well-known, I think, urban forest in Malaysia. And it was, in fact, cited the activities of KDCF in biodiversity policy on biological diversity, Malaysia. It means that it has huge significance for conservation, for education, as well as for conserving community urban forest in other parts of Malaysia, and we should say elsewhere. So in that sense, it has, we should say, huge significant impacts on society. I hope we will have lots of questions from the floors during our Q&A sessions. So I should give a big hand for this excellent presentation. So our next speaker, Dr. Triban, he is the president of Friends of Bukit Kiara, another important urban green lawn in Klang Valley. And his activities and the activities of the Friends of Bukit Kiara focused in driving the gazettement agenda and developing the narratives for the protection of this green lawn by engagement with the stakeholders. So probably it was gazetted very recently, if I am correct. And he has been passionate about sustainability, protection of environment, and the rights of communities, increasing devoting his time to these endeavors. He has studied and worked in UK for over a decade, spent several years in Barcelona, where he was involved in sustainable design and developing water resources for desert communities before returning in 1993 to his roots in Malaysia. So probably because of his works with community people, with sustainable issues, so I should encourage him to talk about Bukit Kiara. He manages an engineering consultancy based in TTDI. Is I should say for his living, but he's passionate about conserving natural resources. So today he'll talk about protection of Bukit Kiara, the role of collective community action. So I'd like to invite Dr. Kiban to share his experience with Bukit Kiara.
Thank you, Dr. Tapan, for those introductory comments. Let me see whether I can share my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah, I think it's coming. Yep, that's
okay.
Perfect.
Let me put it into full screen. Let me see. Yeah, is it not registering? Yeah. Yep. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. As Dr. Tapan has already mentioned, I'll be talking about the Bukit Kiara story and the resilience of the community there, and basically around the subject of the role of collective community action. So, if I may, let me begin. I think the first thing to recognize is that obviously human activity has dramatically impacted biodiversity. And the statistics are quite grim. If you look at the world ecosystems, for example, there's some suggestions that only 3% of that remains fully intact. And of course, the whole issue of primary forest destruction continues unabated as well. And as you can see in the slide here, there are many other facts which are quite worrying. Key to that is, of course, that we are losing something like 200 species going into extinction every day. So these are quite startling facts. And so the green lungs, which obviously we are trying to protect, become very important in this context. So of course, the decline of the green areas in the Klang Valley has continued unabated over the last 70, 80 years. In terms of development. In fact, starting really at the time of the colonial administration, when a lot of plantations were organized, a lot of development which took place were basically converted many of the green areas into monoculture, for example, and then now, of course, development. In that image right in the middle there is between the number 7 and 2 is Kuala Lumpur, and this is where to home down on in terms of our discussion. One of the interesting things about the plantation sectors was that these were, in fact, during the time of the formation of Kuala Lumpur as a federal territory in the 70s, became absorbed into the wider KL district to form part of the area for development. So 3 big major estates were included in this, and the ones which is circled on the left there called K is in fact Bukit Kiara. The others were also quite significant, but what I'm going to be concentrating on is discussing Bukit Kiara. At that time, something like 1,500 or so acres, about 600 over hectares of land was taken over by government for public purpose. And this is something which I think, is quite important to understand as part of the history. What made Bukit Kiara different is that there was right from the beginning a narrative from government that this land or this estate was going to be taken over for the national interest. There was going to be a national botanical gardens built here, an arboretum set up, and also a mausoleum. So in other words, it was going to be public good, the whole area of 600 over hectares. Although government did not pay commercial rates for the land because it was supposed to be for public good, they took it over based on a much lower, valuation. But of course, there was taxpayers' money involved, and therefore moral accountability in terms of what this area was supposed to be for. And of course, there was also accountability to the landowner themselves, because you can't promise someone that you're doing something and then do something else. So, all right from the beginning, there was this narrative about Bukit Kiara becoming a flagship urban park for the rest of the urban population. So the history, as I already mentioned, begins really right at the beginning. If you take this map on the right, the areas marked A to F were the original Bukit Kiara estate. The area marked G was actually gazetted in the early 1900s. as a Malay reserve land, and therefore that green lung was not really developed. And in a way, later on, you'll see that contiguous green lung was quite important in the diversification of this rubber plantation many years later. So as I mentioned, in 1976 or in the mid-70s, this land was taken over. There was a move to set up this world-class, master plan for maintaining the green, which of course didn't materialize. And also in 1982 or so, the Longhouse community, which is still there in Antun, in the area marked C, were moved from the main estate to live here temporarily. And that marked the end of the rubber estate functionality in 1982. And then from the up to about 1990, there were still developments which were basically for the public good. But from 1990 onwards, it became very obvious that things were not going to go the way of the narrative. And then there was a private golf course which was built, and many other developments which started to take place in this land. And it was not until about around about 2007, due to various protests and so on, that there was a cabinet decision to convert this into a large-scale park. But of course, as we will see, this was never ratified. And today, what we have is only 400 acres or 162 hectares of that land marked A in this graph. So basically, this is what's left of that greenery, as you can see. See at the south of that picture, an orange area. This is Taman Rembakira, and this has been the very important struggle for stopping what was going to be a major development in there. And so far, we've been successful in court, but the federal case comes up later this year. So hopefully, we'll be successful in stopping that development from now on. So basically what's happened, particularly last year, after many years, almost 30 years of community action, this green lung, or the remaining 1/3 of what was originally taken over, was gazetted. Something like 111 hectares has been gazetted last year. And another 50 or so hectares in that green lung needs to be also taken over. But this has been leased out to private companies, so it'll be not until 2027 when this can be done. And we hope that, in fact, the whole area will become gazetted in that time. So there's quite a lot, which has happened in the last couple of years, and we can go back into that as to the history of that during maybe question time. But the point is that gazettement is not an end in itself. As we know, what can be given in terms of gazettement can also be taken away. It's just a piece of paper which gives you a certain right. So we are basically starting another journey, and that journey is community engagement. And just like Elaine was mentioning from KDCF, this is something which we are also doing in terms of engaging the public and making sure people take ownership of the green lung. So let me just say something about the history of Friends of Bukit Kiara. We are a community-based organization, and really the work of the organization started in the early 1990s with a loose set of people within the Tamantun Residents Association. Mounting signature campaigns, meeting with the mayors and so on, to make sure that this development was keeping with the original intent. And of course, 1990 was quite significant because that's when we realized that things were not really what was being promised, and so the activity started. But it was not until 2001. That a pro-tem committee was set up under the able leadership of the late I.R. Liu Sheng, who was very much instrumental in setting this all up. And at that time, working very closely with the Segamut MP, Dr. Tan Kwee Kong, who in fact was part of the government machinery. It was quite interesting at that time that we had these bipartisan involvement with the protection of the green lung. And then in the ensuing years, there was a lot of engagement. And in fact, in about 2006, there was a coalition of about 44 RAs and 19 environmental NGOs and so on, which submitted a petition to Prime Minister Tun Abdullah Badawi at that time to gazette the Green Lung and also to stop all commercial developments. And in fact, this had an effect, and there was an announcement in Cabinet in 2007 that something like about 190 hectares would be gazetted as a large-scale public park. Unfortunately, although this was announced, it was never ratified, and there was a lot of toing and froing, and so the public campaign was started to mount, and there were signature campaigns and so on and so forth, as you can see in the timeline. But it was not until 2014 that Friends of Bukit Kira became formalized as a society and registered. And Tan Sri Saleh, in fact, became the first president. And it's interestingly, at that time, Abdul Hafiz Abu Bakar was the secretary. And he is today the chairman of the district of the local TTDI RA. So you can see that a lot of people within the community were really very involved in different aspects of this protection. 2018, Tan Sri Saleh stepped down. I took over as president, and then we've been working very closely with our government MP Hanayo to get the gazettement done, which was successful. But of course, we've started to move the narrative to other things, because gazettement is one area. We have also started to increase in engaging with the community, as you will see in several of the slides as we go along. So of course, we are moving towards trying to championing, and building long-term appreciation of the biodiversity of Bukit Kira, and this is something which we have been doing incessantly over the last couple of years, and hopefully we will do further. I mentioned that this was of course, a rubber plantation, and a rubber plantation is monoculture. That means the forest reserves and the forests and so on were basically cut back to allow for this. But what's interesting is that in the last 45 years, with the rubber plantation not working, this rubber trees have really given way slowly to a secondary forest, and this is something which is quite important. And there's some incredible biodiversity now, based on what our scientists have told us, and there is also a program of tree planting and so on, which is being undertaken at this point in time, and all of this has started to help in terms of creating what is a very rich biodiverse forest. But part of this also is the fact that always contiguous with Bukit Kira was the North Kira area, the Malay Reserve lands and so on, which were literally untouched. So there was always that interconnectivity, the buffer and so on, which I think has been quite important in being able to help this area revive into something which is quite biodiverse. The ecosystem also is very important, because there are 3 rivers which are sources here in Bukit Kira. And this is, of course, very important in terms of the sponge and control for floods and so on downstream. You cannot imagine what will happen if this green lung goes, because the whole of the residential estates which are close by will obviously be affected by these events. And biodiversity has been very well recorded, mainly by volunteers at this point in time. If you go into the FOBK website, a lot of this information is there, both flora and fauna. And of course, all of this has developed over the last 40 or so years. And this is something which is amazing, considering that this is a really urban setting and close to a very built-up area in Kuala Lumpur. But moving on, I think just a few comments about of course, city spaces. We are something like 55% of humanity lives in urban areas now, in cities. So this is a very significant part of our global population. And of course, the impacts of cities are in many. The 80% GDP is generated there. Almost 80% of energy produced is used in cities. Carbon emissions, 75% of that comes from cities. And so we cannot ignore cities. And of course, that development is continuing unabated, fortunately. And what we need to do is be able to control and have balance between these urban lungs and also how to maintain our greenery. The urban density is set to increase by 2050. 70% of the populations will be living in cities. So I think it's really quite important that we find ways of maintaining these green areas, not only because of things like, for example, in the case of Bukit Kiara, we have recorded that migratory birds use Bukit Kiara as a stopping point, both from the TRK as well as Bukit Kiara itself, for their onward journeys to other areas. So these are very important areas. We have of course discovered also that the largest species of fireflies in the world in Bukit Kiara, and this is something which we are doing a study on, and I'll mention a bit later as we go along. Protecting, of course, these green lungs. We work with other CBOs, and of course, today we have KDCF and SACF here with us, and we have very close working relationships with many of these organizations so that we can share experiences and move forward with that. The new urban agenda is, of course, very much meeting with the kind of sustainability development goals we need to try and achieve. And I think the key of this is, of course, environmental sustainability and building resilient urban developments. And this is something which we are really pushing for. And this is why we are, working very hard to stop some of the unbridled developments in this area, because that will change forever the nature of our interaction with the green lungs. To do this, we have been engaging with the community. As I mentioned, this is something which we have been doing a lot of. Of course, with the pandemic, a lot of the physical activity has not been able to take place, but as you can see, we have a whole range of different types of activities which we are doing. And a lot of that in the last year has become online, we have been celebrating days. For example, in 2019, we had a physical event. The last 2 years, it's become more digital. The idea is basically to spread the information, to tell people about the green lung and get basically ownership. And I think this is something which is quite obviously quite important. I mentioned that we're doing that there was a discovery of fireflies over the last couple of years in Bukit Kiara, and we've found that there's a lot of interest in this particular area of work. And we were very fortunate that we've been able to get the GF Small Grants Program to fund a research project, which is ongoing now and will be going on for another year or so. We are hoping that with this funding and the information we are gathering, we'll be able to give a lot more information about the biodiversity of Bukit Kiara and set the stage for a wider study in the future. So to finish off, basically, I think we really have to mobilize all sections of the population to be able to protect these green lungs. There is, of course, the government agencies we have to work with, the civil society groups, CBOs like ourselves, the private sector organizations, and of course, academia. And of course, today, for example, Dr. Tapan is here from Nottingham University doing some very sterling work. And we need to bring all of these actors together to try and, push our share knowledge and the solutions, and of course, push the green lung agenda forward. We worked very closely with many of our partner organizations, and hopefully this can continue. We will be able to protect our respective green lungs for perpetuity and for future generations. So on that note, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Kriban. Very interesting story. So we can learn many things from this Bukit Kiara. So the first learning is, if we keep our nature undisturbed, it will grow naturally. And that is very much evident from this Bukit Kiara. Once it was a rubber plantation and degraded area, then left for many years. So now we can see it's a rich biodiversity area. So that's a good learning for the forestry department and for the government agencies. And second learning is these community people, they are working together with other stakeholders, not for making money, just for conserving our resources, for the services they provide to our society. So I hope we'll have more discussion in the Q&A session. So thanks, Dr. Kriban, for sharing this nice story with us.
Thank you.
And then we have our last speaker, Alicia Theo. So she will talk about Shalom Community Forestry. So that's another important piece of forest that local groups are trying to protect from the so-called development. So like many other countries, for the government officials, for the administrators, policymakers, development is very important for them. But so-called development is not good for the society. So she'll talk about this story. So she's the founder of Shalom Community Forest Society that was formed in 2016, very recent, and with the purpose of advocating for the protection of Shalom Community Forests. So what is happening with KDCF, Bukit Kiara, and other pieces of urban forest. Alicia, she's currently works full-time for her church in Shubangaya. So she'll talk about Shalom Community Forest ongoing efforts to protect the largest urban forest corridor in Klang Valley. So I'd like to invite Alicia to share his experience, to share her experience with us.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Tapan. I'm going to share my screen now.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and the organizer, thank you for inviting me to share about the Shalom Community Forest. Thank you to the audience for coming. Shalom Community Forest, or SACF in short, is a relatively new community forest in Klang Valley, having only been founded about 7 years ago. So this photo that you see here is the main entrance or trailhead to the forest. This is the Setia Alam entrance. There are several trailheads around the forest because it's flanked by different townships in the northern part of Shah Alam. So while you may not be familiar with the name Shalom Community Forest, perhaps you have heard of Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve. So SACF is actually part of the Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve complex. Just to give you a little bit of history, this here is the original Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve when it was constituted in 1909. So fast forward to 2020, only about 6,000 plus acres remain after 4 extensions and 21 excisions. Most of the excisions were for oil palm plantation and also housing and commercial development. So out of this remaining forest, 1,114 acres have been zoned for development, essentially cutting the Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve into half. So where exactly is Shah Alam Community Forest? So to give you an idea, this is the map of Klang Valley. And these are some of the community forests that you may know or be familiar with. This is the Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve Complex, and Shah Alam Community Forest is right here. So SACF forms a critical link between the northern and southern parts of Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve. And yes, SACF is currently unprotected and under tremendous pressure for development. It's under threat right now. So that's why we're here. Right, so let's move on. Shah Alam Community Forest is about 400 acres of lowland Diptera rainforest. So most of the forests here have been logged, selectively logged. And this forest was discovered by a group of Setia Alam residents in 2013. And in 2014, we began the effort to protect it. In 2016, Shah Alam Community Forest Society was formed for this purpose. And today, 7 years later, we are still actively working to prevent this forest from being destroyed and developed. So since we began creating awareness about SACF, more and more people have visited this forest at this peak before the COVID pandemic started. There were at least 1,000 visitors every week, consisting of nature lovers, hikers, runners, mountain bikers, etc. So due to its status as an unprotected forest, SACF is also right now 100% managed by the community in terms of trail maintenance, signages, cleanliness, etc. So SACF Society manages the Facebook group where there are active lively conversations and photos of happenings at SACF. Do visit if you can. We are also a recipient of the UNDP GEF Small Grants Program to help us in the effort to protect this forest. So this is our latest trail map, and which we update frequently to share on our Facebook group, so that in a way to encourage people to visit this forest. So here are some photos taken inside the forest. We are currently conducting a biodiversity survey in the forest, and so far 294 species have been identified by local experts, out of which 35 actually listed in the IUCN Red List of certain species. So even in this small fragmented forest, there's still tremendous ecological value. So the list of threatened species include Malayan tapir, white-handed gibbon, and Sundas loris. Over the years, there have been many roadkill incidents involving Malayan tapirs. I think to date, more than 10, I think in the teens, the number of Malayan tapirs spotted crossing and being killed along Sierra Mokhtar-Dahari, which cuts through the Bukit Teraga Forest Reserve. So let's talk about our strategy. The Shalam Community Forest Society, our strategy from the start has always been two-pronged. Firstly, to raise awareness about the plight of this forest, and secondly, to lobby the government to preserve it for the people. So we have done numerous media campaigns. We have written numerous letters. I have a whole stack of letters, of our correspondence with various government officials. At the same time, we also try to ensure the safety and the accessibility of the trails by maintaining the signages, keeping the area clean. Again, as I was mentioning, a lot of help comes from our community, random hikers and trail users who qualify to help with keeping the trails safe and clean. So let's talk about stakeholders of Shalam Community Forest. So we have three main groups of stakeholders. The landowners, of course. So 2/3 of Shalam Community Forest is owned by MNS, which is the development arm of Selangor State. And 1/3 of it is owned by the Selangor State. The status of the land is called Tanah Kerajaan. These are some of the individuals and agencies that we have had to deal with and engage with in the course of trying to preserve this forest. So as for the community, of course, we have the local and wider community, and these are some of them. All right, and in terms of organizations, we have environmental NGOs as well as corporate entities. So for example, the Tropical Rainforest Conservation Research Center is a conservation NGO that preserves tropical rainforest plant species and leads reforestation projects throughout Malaysia. So right now, the SACF community is assisting in the collection of Deuterocarp seeds from our forest for TRCRC to germinate and propagate. And just yesterday, some of the seeds we collected were processed and planted by our community members at TRCRC's nursery in Almina, Shah Alam. So what about corporate then? SP Setia is a developer with housing projects besides SACF. So from the beginning, they have been aware of the value that these forests bring to their properties, and they have been supporting our work via various means over the years. For example, before they put up a construction fencing near our trailhead a couple of years back, they actually consulted with us on how to ensure continued and safe access for hikers to the forest. And last year, when MBSA released their plan to build a cemetery in the forest, SP Setia joined us in the effort to object and attend the public hearing. So over the years, we have observed various outcomes from our engagement with these stakeholders, and I'd just like to share some of them with you. So through our constant engagement with government officials, we have noticed a greater sense of their awareness about the public's desire for more natural spaces and even some sympathy. Hopefully this will lead to better city planning and more conserved areas in the urban areas. So by establishing safe and accessible hiking trails and also organizing various community activities, we find that more urban people, especially children, young children, have had the opportunity to experience nature firsthand, which we believe have led to greater knowledge and appreciation of the forest. And we are hoping that this generation will grow up to be people who would fight and advocate for their forests wherever they are. So by advocating forest protection on our social media, we intentionally do that. We also have noticed an increased awareness and interest about the role of community participation to conserve green spaces around them. So we have had groups, school groups, and children, school children who have participated, where we had the opportunity to teach them about advocacy, environmental advocacy. So as for environmental organizations, our collaborative projects with them have given our community a rare opportunity to engage in citizen science. I myself have learned so much about ecology and biodiversity from my interaction with various environmental NGOs. And finally, working with corporate entities like SP Setia means having access to extra resources for us. And in this uphill battle of trying to protect SACF, every little bit of help counts. So in closing, I think forests in Malaysia typically fall under special interest groups. For example, forestry department or conservation groups, or maybe even mining agricultural companies, and in our case, developers. I believe that in order to protect the forest, especially in an urban context, in cities, we have to change that narrative. That means changing a forest from a special interest resource into a public interest one. For us, that means demonstrating and proving to the powers that be, the Selangor state government, in our case, that this patch of forest is valued, desired, and needed by the public for ecological, recreational, and educational purposes. Not just a random developer wanting to build a road across for the sake of their property, not for some other purposes like cemetery for a certain company to benefit from. So SACF Society will continue to engage with our stakeholders in the goal of protecting this forest. So that's it from me, and thank you for listening. If you want to find out more about us, you can scan the QR code there for the various links to our pages and platforms, or you can visit us directly on Facebook, Instagram, and our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. There's another excellent story from Shah Alam. So only few hundred hectares of forest that people are trying to protect from the development. So that is the so-called development. I think our government agencies should learn from the community people why they are struggling, why they are trying to protect the forest. What are their motives? What are the purposes of this conservation? Then I think they should be motivated. I should thank all these three speakers for sharing their experience working in different phases of community managed urban forest. Now we can open the floor for Q&A and open discussions. We have a good number of questions from the floor. So maybe I can start with KTCF. So I have here first two questions, and I have some more. So first one is, are there any plans for KTCF society to enter into a formal agreement with the forestry department on the status of forest? And the leading question is, what happens if there are plans to de-gazette the Kota Damansara Forest Reserve? So please, Lynn.
Okay, first of all, we have come up with a joint management plan about 6 years ago, which was never executed. We just need to refine it and resubmit it to the new Selangor State Forestry Director. He's a lot more amenable to community groups and groups that want to have a positive working relationship with the forestry department. So we are hopeful that we will actually enter into a formal memorandum of understanding and work out a joint management plan together, where we will provide a lot of material and physical help and support to the forestry department, like conducting educational activities and community events and community activities that they don't have the capacity to carry out. So we are hopeful that we will enter into an agreement soon, and that right now, even under this informal arrangement, they do consult with us before they make decisions, even decisions like to cut down a tree that is posing a danger to people because it's dead inside, it's going to fall down on cars and hikers. Things like cutting down trees or cementing a particular area where the picnic tables are, they ask us, they consult with us, they want to put up fences, they ask us to come and have a look and work out a compromise. So we would say that it's quite a positive relationship. It's based on goodwill and everyone wants the best for it. It's not as though forestry wants to destroy it and we are the ones who are diametrically opposed to what they are doing. They do want to protect it as well, and they hopefully they want to try to monetize it because they have their KPIs for generating income from recreational forests. So right now, there are plans to enter into another memorandum of understanding or joint management plan. We are requesting a meeting date with the forestry director. There are currently no plans to de-gazette it. In the event that there are plans to develop de-gazette parts of it, like what happened in Bukit Lagong, they are not going to de-gazette the entire forest reserve. They plan to de-gazette a small portion of it, which they say have been degraded and no longer have any primary rainforest species. Of course, we will object to it, which is why in my closing slides on what you can do to support your local community forest society, you act as the eyes and ears of the society, you act as the eyes and ears of the forestry department, which is why it's very important to have a network of supporters and hikers who are very active and who see themselves as stewards, not merely as users. Malaysians like to be users. I come, I have my fun, I leave my trash behind, I feed the monkeys and I wander off. But we have a growing demographic of people who are a lot more aware and a lot more proactive. So if they see things like poaching and illegal forest clearing for agriculture and squatter huts coming up, they let us know, and we let forestry know. And of course, when the community is aware and the community feels invested, we will protest, we will make noise, and we will ensure that the degazettement and degradation does not take place. It's very hard to degazette something that's already been gazetted and something that's intact. What happened in Bukit Lagong was that on the fringes, there was already some development. So if there are plans to degazette, of course, we will start letter writing campaigns, social media campaigns, and there will be a town hall meeting. Generally, town hall meetings in Selangor is only open to people in the same constituency, the voters in the same constituency, and to any NGO that has been involved in the fight. So if an NGO like the Malaysian Nature Society starts writing in, protesting against the development, you may receive an invitation to attend the meeting. But generally, outsiders, let's say you're from another state and you're not part of any NGO or any environmental conservation organization, you may not receive an invitation to attend the town hall meeting.
Thanks, Eileen. We have a few more questions related to KTCF. So one is here, does participation in local town hall meetings for local town plans help in protecting and enhancing community forest? And also you answered the rest of the part of the question. Does outsiders, non-locals, have any say in local town hall meetings? And another question, so it's about the non-locals, it's not in the same district.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so whether town hall meetings are effective, that really depends on the area, that particular forest, who the state assemblyman and MP are, and how the state government views the area. Like Bukit Lagong, we only found out that a parcel was going to be degazetted after some development and degradation had already taken place. They couldn't find a lot of primary rainforest species, though the technical report says otherwise. There is a source of water, it's part of the roaming grounds of the indigenous communities. There are some primary rainforest species, but it depends on the area. So if there's a local community in the area that is very vocal, very involved, very proactive, chances of success would probably be higher, especially if you have an MP or state assemblyman who has been on the ground, come around to talk to people and all. So it depends on the area really, which is why we need to keep, the society has to remain relevant to the local community and to the hiking and outdoor community, even during a pandemic when the trails are closed. We have to stay relevant, we have to stay active, we have to try to find ways to make sure that the local community still acts as the eyes and ears if they see burning, for example, or clearing or illegal fences put up.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Probably we'll have some more questions later. So maybe I can go to Dr. Kriban. So Dr. Kriban, you mentioned that you have started with the GEF SGP funded project to study fireflies in Bukit. How did this come about, and how important is funding for the work you are doing? Dr. Kriban.
Thank you, Dr. Tapan. Yeah, the firefly journey is an interesting one. We had one of our members during an evening walk discovered some fireflies and brought this to our attention. And of course, we had no idea about fireflies at all. So we contacted MNS immediately, and Dr. In fact, Sunny from MNS came over and we did an investigation. And sure enough, there was a community of fireflies, and so. We started basically doing monthly visits and so on. And so the interest started to generate. And then we found that every time we had a meeting to discuss or a public meeting to discuss or to present anything on fireflies, we had 3-4 times more people who attended. I mean, so there was a lot of interest, in fireflies. So we thought, this is interesting. We should try and use this as a basis to create more interest. So we started to have evening nighttime walks, organize talks and so on and so forth. So over a 2 or 3 year period, when the interest started to grow, we then decided that we would do a bit of a study ourselves. We found some money, did a study, a small study, and that gave us basically the background to applying for a larger fund through the GF SGP facility. And then we were able to get those funds last year. So there was a bit of history behind that. Once we got the funds, now we have what we're basically doing as a project based on citizen science. Getting people familiar with data gathering and so on. We have our scientists from FRIM and from UBI involved, helping us to do the groundwork. And of course, the pandemic has made it a lot more difficult. In the last 2 months, for example, we have not been able to enter at all. Though now we have some special dispensation to go back in to do a bit more of study, but much smaller groups than we had intended. So the funding is there, so we are trying to get a lot more information about the biodiversity of Bukit Kiara. Why is it that fireflies are supported, and maybe getting a greater study of the species themselves. So yeah, I think that's has been ongoing, and hopefully we can get quite a lot of information out of this study, and then use that as a basis for what we think maybe requires a wider biodiversity study in Bukit Kiara coming up maybe next year. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Kriban. We have one more related question. Bukit Kiara is a unique example of plantation becoming a secondary forest. What are you doing to study and record the biodiversity which has re-established itself?
Yeah, I think what has been quite instructive for some of us, of course, we are not scientists, those of us who are involved, but based on the inputs we've had from our friends who are botanists and so on and so forth, it looks like there is quite a lot of biodiversity which has developed in Bukit Kiara over the last 40 years or so. And of course, this is a unique example of a plantation, a monoculture plantation, now becoming a biodiverse secondary forest. So the thing is that we need to do a lot more systematic studies to get this information so that it can be recorded. For example, we have several people who are very keen bird watchers, and so we have a very good record of some of the birds which are in Bukit Kiara. So that's already ongoing in terms of volunteers and so on. And we have several individuals who are very interested to do their own work individually to get some of this information. But I think we feel that there is a need for a wider study in terms of biodiversity, and hopefully we can get some funding to do this. The idea behind this, of course, is that to document all of this information so that it becomes part of our narrative. In terms of the long-term protection of the green lung, why it's important, what are we going to lose if the green lung is no more there, and so on. And the other very important thing is we have realized is that the reason Kiara still is thriving is because it has buffer zones. It has the North Kiara area, which has been literally undeveloped, but there are many threats of development there as well at this point in time. So I think, if we can look at the importance of these connectivities and so on, I think, again, that'll become very important in terms of the long-term protection of the green lung, and also making sure that, any development which takes place takes that into consideration. I think, these are some of the important things we're trying to pull together at this point in time.
I have one more question to Dr. Kriban. Is it possible to quantify the value of ecosystem services provided by Bukit Kiara? And if so, does the benefits outweigh the cost of developing Bukit Kiara?
I think this is an ongoing journey. We are gathering information as we go along. Of course, this study with the fireflies, which has been funded by the SGP funds, is an important part of this process. But I think we need a lot more work to be done. We, in fact, at this point in time, pulling together a group of interested individuals and scientists. In fact, Dr. Tapan, you'll be one of them. I'll be approaching to get involved in this panel, so that we can look at doing a more systematic study and data gathering over the next couple of years. So a lot of work needs to be done, but we feel that from the feedback we've had so far, that there is a lot which is potentially can be lost if this green lung is affected in any way. So I think quantifying that in some way scientifically will become part of a very important study and narrative which we can use to further the long-term protection of the green lung.
Thanks, Dr. Kriban. We have some common questions to all of you, but before that, I think I can go to Alicia about Shalom. So we have a few questions. First one is, based on your experience, are the existing housing estates surrounding the BCFR interested and receptive in playing a part in protecting and conserving the reserve forest?
Okay, from our work on the ground, we definitely know that people in general are supportive of protecting the green spaces. I think most of us intuitively know the value and the importance of safeguarding our forests. So as for actual evidence, we can see the participation of the visitors, the users of the forest come from all around. That's why when we first started, we only had trailheads in Setia Alam and Alam Budiman. But eventually, there were more trailheads that start to be opened by various communities residing beside the forest. And to us, this is evidence and indication that the forest is valued by not just us, but the wider community. And we also have seen people coming in from outside of Shah Alam, all the way from Kuala Lumpur and even other states come and hike at this forest. I think one of the draw of this community forest is that you can easily get up to 20 kms, at one go, and there are about 7 water bodies, as well as the fact that Shah Alam Community Forest, we have the highest peak in Bukit Charaka and possibly amongst the other forests at 2 to 6 meters. So we know that no one we have spoken to have said that we don't want the forest, we want it to be destroyed. No one, absolutely no one. But our challenge now is to get them to participate and speak out. So that's the thing that we are focusing on. We are trying to approach them and engage the residents association. This is one of the things that we're doing now. We are approaching various resident associations around the Bukit Charaka Forest Reserve corridor. And then at the same time, we are continuing to work on our media campaigns and to draw people to this forest, because we understand that unless they experience the forest for themselves, it's very hard for people to develop an affinity with something they don't experience and don't love in the process. So we are still doing that, but we know for sure that we do have a lot of support to protect this forest.
Thanks, Alicia. We have a few more questions for you. How does a community forest epitomize multi-stakeholders engagement in the context of conservation? And in that case, how can I personally help to protect Shalom Community Forest?
So, as Edie mentioned just now, there's really no such thing as community forest in Malaysia. So I'm just going to talk about it in a hypothetical sense until we actually get that label, in our forestry laws. So a community forest is basically a co-management or collaborative management of a forest, or urban forest, between various stakeholders, especially between the government agencies and the community. So basically what you're doing is, in a community forest setting, you are decentralizing the management of forest and let the locals manage it. So it's a localized management of this important resource. And why should we do that is because a forest is best kept by those who have most to gain from its well-being. This is common sense. And forest conservation in partnership with local communities have been proven to be more effective in the long term. Of course, importantly, also the benefits of a community forest is that communities can access and participate in the forest for various reasons, especially recreational and educational purposes. And also, while protecting the forest will provide essential ecological benefits to the local environment. So community forest actually helps to foster conversations and dialogues and teamwork among the various stakeholders, the various groups of people living in the community. So how you can personally help to protect SACF is do join our Facebook group and help to spread the word. We need more people to know about this forest so that when the time comes, we have a wider pool of people to get support from, and a lot of times government they do take seriously the public's opinion. So the more the merrier. So do spread the word and share about the existence of this forest and the plight of it.
Thanks. So it says there is some echo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So it means that our participants, they have lots of interest about this urban community forest. We have still many questions, but I would like to raise some common issues that any of you can respond. So first one is, can the panel share some ways to best raise awareness about urban forest, for example, through social media or others? And I can also say the second common question, can the panel share how hard or easy it has been to convince the Rakyat that forests are important to their well-being? So two important issues are here. So floor is three of yours, so you can discuss. Anyone can start.
Okay, I think I'll start first. I think that for the local community, we don't have to put a lot of effort to try to convince them that the forests are essential to our health, mental and physical health, that it's good. So even people who, for almost selfish reasons, know that it increases the value of property when there's greenery nearby. But it also means there's a outdoor recreational space nearby. So people are generally very pro having a forest nearby. The issue we may have is some people might complain about wildlife, long-tailed macaques and all. That's when Perhilatan, the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, and also the local community has to step in and say that we need to reduce the conflict between the local residents and the wildlife. Please stop feeding macaques. Even things like snakes and all, a lot of people can deal with it. They say, we know we bought a home near the forest, we have to live with it. The presence of snakes or wild boars or monkeys. So with the local community, it's not difficult. Everyone wants to enjoy the forest. The important thing is trying to get them to be stewards and not just users. So there's increasing awareness. More people want to volunteer. More people are joining our Facebook groups and liking our page and reading the content and lending their support and voice. So it's important for everyone to keep up to date and to lend your support either in person or even virtually, because that's an essential part of a participatory democracy.
Yeah, maybe I'll echo what Elaine is saying. I think, in Bukit Kiara, for example, we have something like 7,000 people people who are coming to Bukit Kera at a typical weekend before the pandemic, of course. So, a lot of people are using the facility, and, then from the research we've done, a sizable portion of that people who are outside, maybe 15 kilometers and more from Taman Tun. So in other words, people are coming from all over to the Green Lung. And I think we see this not only at Bukit Kera, but also at Kota Damansara, and to some extent also in the other Green Lungs, because I think there are actually very few accessible facilities available. And so, there's a huge, usage of what's there. There are some statistics, for example, in KL, we're told that something like 30% of Kuala Lumpur is actually Green Lung. But when you start to drill down on those figures, you realize that, everything gets put into there, golf courses, gated communities, and all the rest of it. So when you drill down, something like less than 9% of the Green Lung, which is actually accessible to the public. So I think in terms of public usage, and, I think people are very conscious of the need for the Green Lung. There's no doubt about it. But as I think our experience has been is, how do we engage people to go beyond just coming in and doing their walks and, and taking the next step. And that's not easy. And of course, it's something which we are doing, or we have been trying to do. So the basic activities like, the trail walks and having, basic, activities, surrounding the Green Lung, specifically for engaging with the public has been quite important. But of course, a lot of that has been a problem in the last, particularly the last year and a half, because we have not been able to go into the Green Lung physically. But the online presence has become very important in that context. So there's been a lot of engagement online, and I think that's been very effective and very useful. But I still feel that the physical, being on the side, having some activity going on in the Green Lung, having a booth, for example, at the start of a trailhead, just to tell people about what's going on, or some interest being generated like that is obviously quite important. And hopefully we can get back to doing a lot more of that in terms of engagement.
Yep. Thanks, Kevin. Alicia, you want to add something?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, please.
So we know that land in a state, land is a state issue, and especially forested land, because a land that's forested is seen like a deposit, like something to be drawn in the future as a revenue stream, So, so what is important is that we need the people to voice out to politicians, because since it's a state issue, the decisions are made by politicians, our MPs and our other ones, skills and the various other ministers. So I think what's very important is that the public voice needs to be heard, and whoever is watching, you, me, everyone, we are the public. So we have to share, we have to talk about it, we have to keep the conversation going, so that we can pressure and influence decision making amongst the politicians. So whenever you get a chance, whether it's to share through your own personal page, or whether it's to sign a petition or to attend a public hearing, please do so. Because a lot of times the government, they don't really listen to environmental NGOs, because we are special interest groups. They listen to the public. So please participate and engage whenever you can. As for question about how hard or easy it is to convince the right, I think I echo and agree with what everyone said. You really don't need to. People generally know that forests are important. It's just without dispute.
Thanks, everyone. So in fact, the government people or the politicians, they like the voters, not the NGOs who are working for society. So that's the main reason, I think. We have one more common question. Environment NGOs want to preserve the forest, but the state government needs to clear forest for economic development. How can this continuous tussle be solved? So I think it's a common issue for all of us. Anyone can start.
I think it will be an ongoing struggle and a journey. There's no way we can say, oh, the problem is solved for good. We know that it will be protected for eternity. Even gazettement does not afford full protection. So we just have to continue being vigilant, and we have to continue engaging the local community. We have to continue capacity building, making sure the younger generation especially feel connected to the forest and they are willing to take up the fight one day, who knows, 20 years down the road.
Yep. Thanks, Helen.
Yeah, I think the urbanization is something which we can't stop. Obviously, what we need to do is have our ears and eyes on the ground, so that unbridled development is stopped in some way or the other. And I think our experience, and certainly with the Bukit Kiara story, is that of course, if you bring the community together, there you have some chance of actually making a difference. But if you don't, then of course you're going to have these developments just taking place without any checks and balances. So yeah, community action is very important. I think I think we've all indicated that, but people have to step up, and we need people on the ground to come for the petitions and come for the protests and come for the meetings, and of course fund the very important work which needs to be done. For example, with the Taman Rimba Kiara issues, we've had to take the developers to court, and we had to, including the local authority, to court. And all of that had to be funded by our personal funds. So if you don't have the community behind you, and you don't have a lot of people behind you, it's not possible, because there's a lot of money involved. And you need supporting lawyers, you need people in the community, you need strong NGO, and CBO presence to be able to do all of these things. So I think no easy answers. Yeah, no easy answers, but I think a lot of groundwork needs to be done. Without that, we have no way of stopping this.
We have 2 minutes left. Alicia, you want to add something?
Yeah, just quickly, I agree with everyone here. I'd like to address a misconception that there is no economic value of a forest. A lot of people think that a forest is just sitting there taking up space, but a forest has tremendous value, whether it is ecosystem services, cultural services, recreational purpose, health services, and all these will contribute to the economic well-being of a country. So we need to change that misconception. We need to talk about and start, perhaps maybe even study what are the ecosystem values, benefits of a forest in an urban area, whether ecologically or what, So, like for example, in SACF, there's a plan by the local council to build a road across the forest for economic development. Apparently, it's just one piece of road, but when you do that, you destroy a whole part of the forest. What you destroy a space, a recreational, natural space for people to de-stress, to be healthy. You destroy a place where people can go and learn about the forest and learn how to be good stewards of the forest and nature. Destroys so many things. It destroys ecological benefits like water catchment, flood mitigation, clean air. So we need to quantify. We need to find a way to quantify and establish the true value of the forests in our cities.
Yep. Thanks, Vanessa. I'm taking maybe 1 minute from you. So I have a very stupid question. Maybe we can do a research with our politicians or policymakers, we can invite them to just spend 1 or 2 hours in a week for 1 month, and then ask them maybe 2 questions. How do they feel mentally and physically, and whether they like to conserve this forest? Probably after just 1 or 2 months research, we can get the results. So thanks everyone for sharing your very rich experience with all of us. I think participants will be benefited from this discussion. Now on to Vanessa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Tapan, for moderating this workshop. Of course, a big thanks to all our speakers and our audience for joining in as well. I am really keen to see how the urban landscape will be like in years to come as more people move into the city, like all of you say. I do hope that developers will be more conscious about practicing sustainable methods when creating new living spaces as well, rather than clearing all the trees and destroying our existing green areas. But I am hopeful, like all of you, that more people will come together and voice out and protect their existing green areas. So ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our workshop today. I look forward to seeing you later at 3 p.m. as we find out more about reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, forest conservation, and livelihoods. I'm going to see all of you soon, 3 p.m. Bye.
Thank you.